Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Welcome to Supercharge Your Purple Team exercises with threat intelligence. Today, I'm going to talk about cyber threat intelligence, or CTI, and how that can contribute to Purple Team exercises. So, I'm Xena Olsen, also known as Cheerio on Twitter. I'm a Blue Team Village senior lead, a doctoral student in cybersecurity at Marymount University, a cyber threat intelligence analyst, a SANS Women's Academy graduate. I have an MBA in IT management, 7GX certs, and I'm a huge fan of all things purple. So I'm going to be sharing a lot of really good resources in this talk. So I created a repo just for you, and it's at the bit.ly link there on the slide. So Confidence Con Conf 2020. But before we get started, I have a really quick note from the lawyers. So, I'm not speaking on behalf of my employers. The opinions I express are mine alone. I am here in my own individual capacity, and the use of size Purple Team exercise framework later in this talk does not endorse them as a vendor. Okay. So, since COVID and the pandemic, I think most of us, at least I have, been staying in. So, I decided to make a really fun talk and bring the party to you. So, to set the theme of this talk, I'll be using lyrics from various deep house and chill artists. I'll be taking you out for a night on the town to show you purple teaming from a CTI perspective. I'll take you to the party, the after party, and the after party. I also made a custom Spotify playlist with all the songs I used in this presentation, along with a few extras. So you can find the link to the Spotify playlist on the GitHub repo at the bit.ly link. So, we are going to be the stars of our night out as we build out intelligence-driven purple team exercises. And just an FYI, in this talk, I will not focus on the Microsofts, the Targets, the Walmarts, the Googles of the world, and by that meaning organizations that I imagine in my head have a super mature purple team. But instead, I'm going to be focusing on pretty much everyone else. So first, I'm going to discuss some issues related to purple. So, if you're lucky enough to have a purple team at your org or even resources dedicated to purple team exercises, you'll find that there might be some disagreements with what purple is and what purple does. So, I've heard of some places doing continuous testing of controls as a form of purple team exercise. I've heard of other places running full team purple exercises with blue and red. I've heard of Red emulating the latest threat actor in the news to see where their org is in the event of an attack. And then I've also heard of people testing the various techniques and sub techniques of MITRE ATT&CK as part of a purple exercise. And I'm sure there's variations of this, of everything that I shared. So basically, purple is really unique to the organization. Also, there are varying degrees of purple maturity. So I will be focusing on the orgs that are willing to tackle intelligence-driven purple team exercises. The other great thing about purple is that especially with blue and red teams, it's really important that they collaborate. It leads to not only the sharing of ideas and increasing skill sets, but most importantly, improvement in the security posture of the organization. So, how can you justify intelligence driven purple team exercises at your org when purple looks so different at every single org? And another question, how can intelligence driven exercises help teams collaborate and drive improvement at the organization. So, I'll offer you some ideas in this talk that you can take back to your org to help you improve your security posture. So we'll start the evening out with some deep house to ease you into the purple team exercise framework. Then we'll turn up the volume with some bass boosted threat intelligence content. And then we'll finish out the night with some chill out music for the after party and the after party. So, we are going to use the Purple Team exercise framework in this talk to help step through a Purple Team exercise to show you how CTI can help your Purple Team exercises. So, I'm just going to rattle off a definition really quick from the Purple Team exercise framework. That Purple Team exercises, according to this framework, are cyber threat intelligence led, emulating tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, leveraged by known malicious actors actively targeting the organization to identify and remediate gaps in the organization's security posture. The Purple Team exercise framework uses the following frameworks, models, and processes. So it uses MITRE ATT&CK, it uses Eric Van Buggenhout's threat intel process, and of course, the pyramid of pain. I also recommend including the diamond model and the adversary detection pipeline model to help build out the threat intelligence products that feed the Purple Team exercises. So, what are some goals of the Purple Team exercise framework? Well, one is to test attack chains against a target organization. Another is to train the organization's defenders or blue team. Another is to test the TTPs that have not been tested before in the organization. Another is to test the processes between security teams. Another is preparation for zero knowledge red team engagements. And then there's, of course, red team reveal or replay after the zero knowledge red team engagement. And most importantly, to foster a collaborative culture within the security organization. So basically, the Purple Team exercise framework provides a framework for improvement of the security team's processes, detection, response, and visibility of the organization. So Eric Van Buggenhout of Invisio, the course author of Purple Team courses at SANS Institute, so he helped create SEC 599 and SEC 699, shared his threat intel process for Purple. So the PTEF, otherwise known as Purple Team Exercise Framework, suggests using Eric's threat intel process. So we will use that to go through examples with a little bit of glow in the dark CTI sprinkled throughout by me. I'm going to show you with some practical examples of how to incorporate CTI, cyber threat intelligence, into the Purple Team exercise framework. I'm going to provide a few different use cases so you can tailor the ideas and suggestions for your organization. So let me take you dancing. First, we are starting with understanding the target org as part of Eric's threat intel process. We want to understand what is going on with the business, other security teams, and what goals we need to hit as the CTI team. So for the business, I usually recommend looking at the management discussion for the 10K, 10Q, and if you don't have that, basically the annual report or whatever goals report you have. And for this department and security team, I really recommend having conversations with them and finding out what they liked, what they didn't like, regarding your previous threat intel products. And a lot of times these teams will have goals like annual goals or quarterly goals that they have to meet. So as a CTI analyst, I would want to talk with them and find out what they are so that I can build out products to help them do their jobs better. So essentially, the CTI initiatives can help create your threat landscape baseline. And the purpose of the CTI initiative is to create a threat landscape specific to the org that you track over time so you can spot anomalies. It's also to prioritize organization threats and to build out deliverables for other teams. So now that we have a good idea of what is going on in the business and with other teams, let's look at the operational environment. So Scott J. Roberts in CTI squad goal setting requirements and Brian P. Kime in threat intelligence, planning and direction, they have some suggestions as far as how to understand your operational environment better. So for instance, review your industry verticals, review threat actors and historical attacks, not only against your org, but also against your vertical. You want to assess your internal and external exposure. So, how do you do that? I suggest running attack scenarios and understand the attack progression. Go from external to internal and then internal to external and really understand what's going on. So, between understanding the business needs and concerns and being familiar with the operational environment, this lays a really good groundwork, for being able to prioritize TTPs for the Purple Team exercise. So, we're going to use three different ways to identify an adversary through the adversary detection pipeline model. So, the adversary detection pipeline model refers to the analysis of organization specific threats via structured and unstructured formats for an adversary detection pipeline focused on business, departmental, and CTI initiatives. So first, we'll look at email attack data, and then we will look at the use of public threat actor reports and open source intelligence that is specific to your org's threat landscape. And then third, we are going to look at an incident that your org had. So using email attack data, you have a source of data that can give you info on some, not all, of the various ransomware variants sent to your org, malware, phishing campaigns, business email compromise, BEC, and other attacks. So through looking at all of the email data, including the blocked, you can gain a better understanding of the type of TTPs that are being used against your org prior to the post-exploitation phase. So when you incorporate the assumed breach model in conjunction with looking at the TTPs of the email attack data, you can get involved in proactive security practices through ensuring you have visibility, detection, and security controls. The diamond model is great. It can help you structure your pivoting. It can also be used to make activity groups. So you got to get kind of creative when you use the diamond model, and you have to use it in a way that works for your organization. So we will start with using the diamond model with your email data, both blocked and delivered, of course, to get a baseline on your organization specific threat landscape. So if you see the repetitive use of the infrastructure and capability vertices of the diamond model in your email attack data, you can group those attacks together as a threat activity group and name them something that's an easier way to convey data, such as acid burn or fuzzy snuggly duck. So this table here, it shows you the blocked, delivered, and clicked malicious emails. This can be used to prioritize purple team exercises, such as looking at the TTPs associated with the clicked or delivered campaigns first. You can take it a step further and prioritize looking at actors that show a high click rate of delivered messages. I mean, what sets that activity group apart from the others? So, just asking yourself really good questions when you look at the data. So this threat actor heat map, it's just a fancy way of grouping a bunch of attacks based on the diamond model. Then instead of listing out the infrastructure and capabilities of the attack in a really, really long sentence, you give it a name. The names represent various activity groups specific to your org. So for purple team exercises, you can use the threat actor heat maps to see the activity and prioritize purple team operations based upon delivery or clicked messages and the associated TTPs. This is just another visual representation of the table. If you don't like numbers, then you can use this and use colors. So whatever you like. You can also use the MITRE ATT&CK Navigator to view all the TTPs for your threat activity groups to help you prioritize your purple team exercises. So purple team exercises don't have to be about only emulating the behaviors of attacks in a specific sequence. You can use the MITRE ATT&CK sub-techniques to consecutively test how your org responds, starting with the technique that overlaps the most based upon your internal attack traffic. So you can notice different people, teams, departments being attacked via the email data you are tracking as part of the adversary detection pipeline model. If you are aware of the TTPs or commands of the various malware, you could suggest a purple team exercise based upon that specific threat. So this can help feed purple team exercises based upon business and security initiatives you determined in the threat intel process of understanding your org. You can create threat actor dossiers based upon email attack data. These are really helpful for purple team exercises. So in the threat actor dossier, you want to include a high-level overview of the threat activity group. Then you want to include a heat map of the threat activity group. And finally, you want to include the set of TTPs with very specific procedures. The TTPs you gather based upon your internal email attack data can also be used to make recommendations to your blue team to block or mitigate before the purple team exercise. Next, we have public reported threat actors. So great resources are, of course, public threat actor reports and white papers. Some blogs are really great. Any commands and scripts that I find in public threat intel reports that could be used for adversary emulation, I've been calling those indicators of emulation. They're different than indicators of compromise because the indicators of emulation I can actually give to red team or whomever to perform the actions to actually do the exercise. I recommend focusing on reports that have indicators of emulation in addition to the high-level TTPs. Those are kind of hard to find, but when you find them, stick with that. Make a note of it. I've found a few really good FireEye blogs that provide a lot of detail for purple team exercises. So when looking at publicly available threat reports, you want to look for everything that's related to the pyramid of pain. You might need to pivot off of hash values, domains, IP addresses, and pretty much anything else to get to the TTPs for the purple team exercise. So you can use the pyramid of pain as a guide when reviewing and collecting data from publicly available threat reports. So we'll talk more about extracting TTPs in a bit. And it is important to find good reporting sources, like I said previously, for the command line, PowerShell, and any scripts used. As you continue your research, you will need to prioritize the various threat actors and threats you find that you think could impact your org. Usually, when sorting through various threats, you can think about the attacker's intent, opportunity, and capability. So, also as a little aside, some rabbit holes if you want to go down them. David J. Bianco and Kat Self, in their talk at the SANS Threat Hunting and IR Europe Summit 2020, shared a method of prioritizing hunting using polar geometry. So you can modify the technique and all the stuff that they did for their hunt activities and prioritizing that and create a prioritized workflow with polar geometry for CTI as well. So how do you know which threat actor to pick? There's tons. So personally, I would recommend starting with threat actors that target your vertical. And you can kick it up another notch by not only matching your vertical, but also technology targeted. So I'm going to give you an example. CrowdStrike, they recently released a report on Pioneer Kitten, an Iran based adversary that likes to exploit remote external services, VPNs, and network appliances. So look at the targeted technology to see if you have it. And if you do, and you're in the list of targeted industries, then I would consider adding that threat actor to the list to include in purple team exercises. I know this is an oversimplification, but if this is all you got, you can start with what you have and what you know. You can also find a really good lineup to pick from regarding threat actors on size community threats. And I'll share more about this as we get to the creating a plan in the intel process. You can also identify incident data that you want to get better at detecting or gain better visibility on. You can run exercises based upon whatever works for your org and the resources available. So, for instance, I ran into someone from a small security team at a SAN summit. They were just implementing a SIM, so something that collects the logs, right? So I asked if they had an internal team or how they use Intel, and they said that they were too busy and short staffed to even approach the use of CTI, cyber threat intelligence, let alone anything purple. So this got me thinking of how I could help smaller teams benefit from CTI and purple team exercises. Some might not even have the bandwidth to tackle the email data. As one suggestion, orgs in similar situations could use the atomic red team tests and the C2 matrix to see what they can detect. I mean, I was able to set up the atomic red team in a really, really short amount of time. So that's something to consider. So now we're going to gather some threat intelligence. So when you're gathering the threat intelligence, whether you use email attack data, publicly available threat reports, or an incident specific to your org for the purple team exercise, you will need to perform research, most likely. In a 2019 CTI survey, Rebecca Brown and Robert M. Lee share some suggested data collection sources. So, of course, internal tickets, WAF, email analysis, endpoint, IDS. Uh, so, open source intelligence, I've already mentioned white papers, threat reports. Threat researchers are another really good resource. Anything in the news, DOJ indictments, sharing groups. So if you're a member of an ISAC, any certs, anything the certs released from different countries, TLP Amber and TLP Red private intel groups, and then threat feeds and intel vendors. So for instance, the email attack data. Whatever campaign you pick to emulate, you will need to perform some research on what clues you can find that may have been shared publicly, or you could pivot through some sandboxes or even looking up reports related to the malware or techniques. For public threat actor reporting, you are going to need to look at the white papers, threat reports, security researchers, DOJ indictments, sharing groups, and anything your threat intel vendors may or may not have. And then for incidents specific to your org, you will still need to be able to search in sharing groups, ISAC certs, pivoting through sandboxes, security researcher publications, and more. Of course, this list is not exhaustive, but hopefully it gives you some ideas. MITRE Attack offers a training resource on how to make TTPs by Katie Nichols and Adam Pennington. I recommend checking it out. Also, as a little side note, if you're going to use the publicly available threat actor reports and plans, Adam Pennington at his DEF CON 28 Red Team Village talk called Emulating an Adversary with Imperfect Intelligence, he talks about the various dependencies for the techniques and helpful tips on building out an adversary emulation plan based on open source reporting that you can use for the Purple Team exercises. And as you get further into this, getting better at malware analysis and understanding what it is that you're looking at is really helpful. So, Coleman Kane, a PhD candidate and a senior cyber threat intelligence research analyst, has some really great malware analysis materials. And then also Manapa KA, an information security investigator at Cisco, has a really great book called Learning Malware Analysis, where he uses memory forensics techniques to analyze malware samples to extract behaviors. I highly recommend. It's a good book. Also, remember, we are extracting the TTPs to provide value to the org so that your security team can look at the controls, the detection, and the response for all the stages of the attack path of your org. For the purposes of this talk, I will show you an example of looking at an org-specific campaign. The techniques and process I'm going to share could be used for the email attack data, the publicly reported threat actors, and for incident data. And caveat, just I thought I'd add this in there, with incident specific, please practice good OPSEC, and I will leave that to your discretion and won't get in a long conversation about that. So here's the scenario. Okay, so in the business's annual report, X team is leading a program to form partnerships for a new incentives program that is revenue generating for the organization. Keeping an eye on the department, you notice a campaign that's being sent specifically to those people associated with the project. Purple has an exercise coming up, and you know how important it is to the org to support the revenue generating incentives program. So, why not create a Purple Team exercise out of it? So we're going to use the MITRE attack tactics to guide research and extraction of the TTPs. So the process I use, I look at Joe Sandbox MITRE attack section, and then from the Joe Sandbox specific entry in the report, I check the atomic red team for the technique. Then I look at the YAML contents to see if it fits my use case. And then whatever isn't there, I Google. I've also pivoted through multiple sandboxes, so not just Joe Sandbox to get additional TTPs related to the campaign. So for the purposes of this talk, I am going to provide highlights because it's a little bit of a long process of extracting the TTPs. So for initial access, the campaign that we're looking at was an email with an exe attachment. So whether an organization blocks exe attachments or not, what I'm interested in are the behaviors of these campaigns, since they are targeting people involved in a new revenue generating business initiative. That is why we are taking an assumed breach approach. Execution. So when you look at the specific section of the malware report, do your best to get the commands that can help adversary emulation. So for T1047, I couldn't find the atomic red team test that fit my use case. So then I had to do some Googling and I found something on Stack Overflow. It wasn't until later, like a lot later in the TTP extraction process, that I just happened to find a technique in the atomic red team that fit my use case, but it was under a different technique name. So keep that in mind as you're going through this process. Privilege escalation. So once again, getting command line arguments are important. And here's a good reason why. So for this one, I went to Malware Bazaar and I looked up the sample, and this particular command line argument is basically where they store a lot of the like stolen creds that they're getting and passwords and all of that. And I wanted to see what YARA rules were associated with it. And what I found was a YARA rule from 2015, and it was still catching samples off the command line argument. So what does this tell me? This tells me that I need to include it in my report since it has remained the same since 2015, maybe longer. I mean, it might change tomorrow, but for now it hasn't. So it's important. There was a lot of defense evasion with this report. And as you're looking through the malware and TTP extraction, and behaviors, you also want to include things that are useful for defenders as well. So for credential access, they're trying to get credentials from browsers, and there is an atomic red team for that. Collection, they are trying to get the installed mail clients info and passwords. There's an atomic red team for that. And then command and control, when you look at command and control, you want to get the different TTPs associated with that. And then you can go to the C2 matrix, and they basically have a lot of the stuff laid out. So you can kind of look at what you need and then just follow the chart and then pick what you need. And the wonderful thing about the C2 matrix is that it has its own VM. So bam, like something really easy. You don't have to install all of these tools and all this stuff. Just use the VM. Make your life easier. So for exfiltration, this is a really good place to consider how your org handles encrypted exfil, as well as to understand how your org handles exfil just in general. Whether it's encrypted or not, sometimes you get lucky, and companies will share how the exfil happened during a data breach. So knowing what you do at your org can help you gauge where you're at. Also, just a little side note, I recommend do not use real PII and credit card data for exfil testing and exercises. I know that seems common sense, but I just had to add that in there just in case. So it doesn't seem to have any destruction involved with the impact in this campaign. They're just like no ransomware. It's just stealing creds. So once you extract the TTPs, you need to analyze and organize the information. And part of the Purple Team exercise framework provides a template to collect the TTP information. It also provides suggestions on working with other teams to decide which TTPs to actually test in the Purple Team exercise. So once the TTPs are decided upon, teams can work together to create a plan. If you are using a publicly available reporting or threat actors, any of that, here's some places where you can get a plan already built out for you. So save yourself some headache. So the Scythe Community Threats GitHub, they have APT19, APT33, Chimera, Cozy Bear, Deep Panda. They also have Emotet, Evil Corp, Orange Worm, and Ransomware, and I think a few others. There's the Mordor project. I already mentioned Atomic Red Team. Miter Attack actually has adversary emulation plans for APT3 and APT29. And then there's other open source reporting such as ransomware infections. So for emulate the adversary, this is where CTI moves their action items to emulation of the adversary to wait for the rest of the phases of the purple team exercise to complete. So when you go back to the purple team exercise framework where the other team members finish the preparation for the purple team exercise and actually complete the exercise, CTI analysts can attend the exercise as a spectator. They don't have to though. It's completely up to them, management, all of that. Also, too, the CTI manager in the org decides if they want cyber threat intelligence to introduce the threat actors TTPs during an actual purple team exercise meeting and kickoff. So that's kind of org specific. You don't have to do it. Sometimes red or other teams, purple coordinator does it. So the lessons learned phase of purple is where CTI analysts can learn even more about the org and take these insights back to the products they create for other teams. So now we're at the after party. So through this exercise, you saw a practical example of how CTI can be used in purple team exercises. You were able to determine that the attacker is looking for browser and email passwords for the key people in your org that are involved with the new revenue generating business initiative. So through the purple team exercise, you can find out how easy it could be to get the passwords from those particular users in that part of your network. And the purple team exercise can also help you look at your org's visibility, controls, detection, and response. Also, consider if there's a site associated with the initiative that you can access off network. If so, is 2FA enabled? Good questions to ask. Just ask yourself a lot of questions. So, you were able to support business initiatives and security team initiatives through understanding your internal attack landscape through the CTI initiatives, essentially. The org does not need to get to full post exploitation activities for CTI analysts to get value out of the TTPs that the attackers share. So Roberto Rodriguez, a principal threat researcher at Microsoft, also known as Cyber War Dog on Twitter, he has a great resource on using Excel for the MITRE ATT&CK heat map. It's tracking hunt team and how hot your hunt team is. So you can do the same for purple/adversary emulation, where you use the MITRE ATT&CK navigator to track progress and create metrics for senior management. So here's an example of how you could use the MITRE ATT&CK navigator and TTPs to create metrics and track progress. So these are the behaviors of the attacks coming at the organization. We have X% coverage with our controls, X% detection, and we are in the process of addressing X gaps through X, Y, and Z actions. So this provides meaningful and org-specific metrics and shows due diligence to your shareholders, investors, management, as well as justification for any security products you have. And also too, it's colorful, so you can just show the colors, kind of like a flip fold calendar. It's fun. So now we're at the after party. After the after party. So how can we keep the party going? commit to intelligence-driven purple team exercises, use models, frameworks, processes to make your life easier, like the MITRE ATT&CK, the diamond model, the C2 matrix, the pyramid of pain, the purple team exercise framework, YAR rules, Eric von Bogenauts, threat intel process, and of course, the adversary detection pipeline model. Going to ask you to please talk with your CTI team and tell them what you need. Most people aren't psychic and they can't read your mind. So talk with them. Just have conversations. I promise. I don't bite. At least I don't. I'm fairly certain other CTI analysts don't either. Also, get a copy of the Purple Team Exercise Framework. You can find that on SAI's website, and also too, there's a link to it in the GitHub repo, and I'll show you the link again in a second. And Jorge Archiles, the CTO of SAI, he put together a free workshop on the Purple Team Exercise Framework, so I highly recommend checking that out. So basically, CTI helps maximize the value of Purple Team exercises to the business. So in this talk, I showed you a practical example of how CTI would fit into a Purple Team exercise using the Purple Team exercise framework. I hope the ideas shared with you today help you supercharge your Purple Team exercises with threat intelligence. So to close, eat, sleep, purple, repeat. Eat, sleep, purple, repeat. Thank you so much for your attention and coming to my talk. Here is the bit.ly link again. Please be sure to check it out. It's a custom GitHub repo I made just for you. I'm Cheerio on Twitter, and that's my LinkedIn. Please feel free to connect. That's a really long URL there, but Xena Olsen, there's not too many Xenas, hopefully. And a special thanks goes out to a couple people here that made this talk possible, especially Scythe and Bryson Bort and Jorge Archiles, as well as SANS Institute for being super awesome. Thank you very much. And now I am going to hand it back to the studio.